My name is Phyllis Bennis. I'm a fellow of the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington, D.C. I'm also a fellow of the Transnational Institute in Amsterdam. ISIS is a direct product of the U.S. occupation of Iraq. It was created in 2004 as one of a number of Sunni organizations challenging the U.S. occupation. It morphed through various kinds of organizations, took a role in the civil war, the sectarian civil war in Iraq. When the Syria crisis emerged, it took advantage of that, crossed the border, re-emerged in Syria, and now is working to control territory, very violent organization, but its roots are directly with the U.S. occupation of Iraq. ISIS is a very violent organization, but it's not more violent than armies and other organizations that have existed and that exist today. If we're serious about ending the crisis caused by the rise of ISIS and the war against ISIS, which is responsible for enormous suffering throughout the region, we have to take very seriously that each military action by the United States sparks greater resistance, greater support for ISIS, and down the line makes things worse. It may or may not help at the moment. Mostly it does not. But even if it does, at the moment, 2 weeks, 1 month, 6 months later, in the medium term, let alone the long term, it's making the situation worse. It's breeding more opposition, creating more terrorism, creating more terrorists, and creating a situation in which many people, especially in Iraq, are looking at the role of the United States as playing the role of the Air Force of the Kurds and the Shia against the Sunnis. So it's making the United States a participant in a sectarian war. That's making everything worse. Despite the violence, and it is a very violent organization, we have to go back to the basics of how do you end conflicts. We need negotiations. We need new diplomacy. We need ceasefires. We need arms embargoes. We need far more money to be spent on taking care of refugees and internally displaced people. There's an enormous amount to do, but it does not include military force from the United States. The alternatives need to start with the old saying, first, do no harm. This is the Hippocratic Oath. U.S. military strikes are doing a great deal of harm. We need to start with do no harm. That means stop the airstrikes. Make real the commitment that says no troops on the ground. That means withdraw the 3,500 troops that are already back on the ground, and maybe dozens or hundreds more of secret CIA and Special Forces troops that might also be on the ground that we don't know about. They should all be withdrawn. They are doing harm, not good. We need new negotiations that involve the United States and the other major powers, Russia and Iran on one side, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Jordan, all the countries that are supporting the opposition forces in Syria as well as the Iraqi government. There need to be negotiations on ending the war in Syria, ending the war in Iraq. That means the U.S. has to deal directly with Iran, not only in the nuclear talks, but also in political talks about the regional crisis to end this war. There needs to be negotiations. There needs to be ceasefires on the local level first, rising to the regional and eventually the national levels. And there needs to be, and this is the hardest, an arms embargo on all sides. When the United States says Russia and Iran must stop sending arms to the Assad regime in Syria, I agree with that. But we can't be serious about that as long as the United States and its allies are sending arms to all of the various opposition forces fighting against that regime. There needs to be a full ceasefire on all sides. Then there needs to be a massive UN-sponsored global negotiation to end the civil war in Syria, to resolve the regional crises, and to allow once again some level of rebuilding. And that's when the United States will owe an enormous debt to repay for the damage it has done in the region.